Hello friends and welcome. I'm Sarah Liz and I am so excited to share this project with you. It is a light up shaker cell phone. Why have one interactive element when you can have two? So we're going to use the Trinity Stamps smartphone sayings and the cell phone mini slimline die set along with the sprinkled border die, but we're going to use it totally differently. Watch this. I'm so excited. And then an easy light. All of these are available in the Trinity Stamps shop, so definitely be sure to check that out. I'm going to start by doing some stenciling. This stencil is designed to create a little border of sprinkles, and you just shift the stencil down, right? So there are 4 different lines of sprinkles, but I'm going to stencil the whole thing and then I'm going to rotate it. So I'm going to do this 3 times with some pale purple ink on some lavender cardstock. And what you're going to notice is that the dots kind of overlap each other in some places, but I really like that look. So here is another rotation, and I am going fairly light-handed. This is a background on my phone. Before my 4th rotation, off camera, I sprayed it with some alcohol and cleaned it off because for this last one, I'm using some Delicata white shimmer ink. And it doesn't show up super white, but it does add this really amazing shine that I love for a shaker. And you can see it when it hits the light. There is just there that lovely, lovely shine. So I have cut the cell phone frame out of some dark navy cardstock, and then I have 3 other pieces that I'm going to be working with here. The frame measures 3 inches by 6 inches with some rounded corners. So I am going to add a little bit of glue and add this to a piece of acetate that's 3 inches by 6 inches. And then I will just take my scissors after that, and I'm going to round the corners and just follow right along the line of my cardstock. It's a really easy way to create that matching shape. I did see in another video, one of my team members on the Trinity Stamps team, Cassie Trask, used a corner rounder for this, and it didn't even occur to me to try that. I had already made this card at the time. So here I am, I'm going around that purple piece that we stenciled on. I will go around both pieces of acetate, and then I have a card base. It is 6 inches by 6 inches, scored at 3. I folded it in half, and then I just rounded all of those corners. Later on, off camera, I will also do that to one piece of vellum. At the bottom of my phone, I'm going to have this set of 4 buttons. And so there's a solid sort of rectangular piece and then a bunch of buttons, and I've cut them each out twice. So I have one from colored cardstock and one from white cardstock for that inside piece, but you could just cut the whole thing out of white and then use a marker, an alcohol marker, whatever you have, and color in around the outside of the buttons before you assemble it. I like wet glue for this because it gave me time to put them on and then wiggle everything kind of into place. I was very conscious of working quickly enough that all the buttons could still move by the time I had them on there. I'm going to go ahead and add some more glue and then add that onto my frame. So that's on the acetate, and we can start stamping. I'm going to create a custom greeting for this phone. And so to me, the easiest way to do that was just to pull out all of the stamps that I wanted to use and create a template that would help me line everything up. So I'm going to have, hello friend, I miss you, happy birthday. I just stamped those onto a piece of scrap cardstock. It does not matter where they are because I've cut out the speech bubble dies, you know, like when you're texting back and forth with somebody. I cut those out of some scrap cardstock as well, and I will use those to help me line everything up and make sure they're exactly where I want them. Then I can pop my little bubbles into place and stamp directly on them. I can only do 2 at a time, so I'm starting with the hello and the happy birthday. And then I'm going to have to rearrange the friend I miss you because I was hoping I could put them both on and stamp them at the same time. But I couldn't get them as close together as I wanted to. So I restamped I miss you, and I'll do just that piece first. And I will stamp that down onto my little piece. And then I can pull that out while I add the friend on there and get that all lined up. If you're worried about the placement and if it's exactly where you want it when you're putting them both on the same little die cut, you could also stamp that onto some acetate first to check your placement. But I felt fairly confident in this one. The bottom was really straight. I didn't have any descenders that were going to throw my eye off. Once I have those all stamped, then I have another piece that I die cut using the cell phone frame, and then I just taped the frame and the innards all together. But you could have just cut those out like I did with that purple piece, right? 3x6 and then round the corners. This one is just some printer paper because I want it really thin because I'm making a template that I'm going to use 3 different times on this card. So first I'm going to put this onto my frame that has the acetate inside because I want to place down my speech bubbles that I stamped. I need to place the speech bubbles and then cut the hole out of that purple stenciled piece, and then I need to place my lights. Okay, and I want to make sure that on all 3 of those layers, I'm looking at them in exactly the same place. As I go to add my cardstock pieces on here, I'm just using my finger and kind of smearing the glue onto the acetate to make sure that it's not going to ooze out from underneath those and create a mess on my acetate. I want to keep it really nice and clean, but then I can peel off that piece of printer paper and this is lined up just perfectly. Next, I'm taping it onto the purple piece, and here I'm going to put the die right on top, and I can wiggle it and kind of feel it pop into place like a puzzle piece. I like the printer paper because anything thicker than that, and then the outside of the die leaves sort of an indentation and my cardstock behind it, and I wanted to avoid that. This turned out beautifully. So then I can pull that template off again and use it a 3rd time. This is going to create the holes where the light is going to shine through from my easy light. So before I go to sort of assemble the lights and use that template a 3rd time, I'm going to start putting my pieces together. This first step is optional. I cut 2 pieces of acetate, and the first one I'm gluing to the purple piece, and I added glue only around the edges where the frame of the cell phone will hide that. But I didn't want my shaker bits getting stuck in those little holes where I want my lights to shine through. Then on the back of my purple cardstock, I'm adding a piece of vellum. This makes it so you can't see the wires for the lights. It would be kind of challenging to see them anyway. You would only see it if you held it at just the right angle, but for me, it was worth it to add that extra step. I could have used foam tape to pop up the frame of the cell phone, but I didn't want that much thickness. I'm already going to be using double thick foam tape for my easy light, and so this keeps it as low profile as possible. I have 4 pieces that I stacked and glued together. I need to do the same thing with that little bar that goes behind my buttons because I need a way to push the button for the easy light. So ultimately on the inside of this card, I will write call me, and when you push the call button, that's what turns the light on. There is a stamp in that set that says call me, so you could do it that way as well. So here are my 4 pieces of cardstock stacked up, and I'm gluing that inside of my frame and my acetate. And then here are my 4 frames all stacked together. And I'm actually adding this one to the purple cardstock where we also have another layer of acetate. I'm smearing that glue with my finger to make sure I'm not going to have anything oozing out and making a mess, and then you can kind of see it on the edges of the cardstock. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, can you tell? But certainly you could use double-sided tape, or you could have put rip and stick sheet on the back of that if you prefer. So now I have my card base here where I've set my template again, and I am just making little X's right in the middle of each of those little bubbles. And here is my easy light. This has 3 wires with lights on them. It's from Pear Blossom Press, and then you just pop the battery in and push the button. And my friends, that is it. That's why it's called easy. Here, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I am taping down each of those lights onto the X's that I made with my pencil. If you twist the wire, you can kind of see the light points up in one direction. It would have been a little easier if I had put down the switch first. I want it right behind that call button. So you can see me sort of holding it in place with my pencil hovering over it. And then I move that top piece to make my pencil mark. I'm going to go ahead and add some double-sided tape onto the back of the switch, and I'll remove that backing paper, and then I can line that up exactly where I need it to go so that my button is in the right place. But once I get it on there, I kind of have all of my wires headed off to one direction because of the way I tape them down. I don't know why I didn't just pick up the tape to make these easier to arrange. But in the end, I very gently kind of found places for each of the wires to sit, and I added a bunch of tape over the top, and it's going to be just fine, right? Like, this really is fairly foolproof as long as you're gentle. Then I am using the world's best foam tape from Pear Blossom Press. It's the perfect thickness for your easy lights, and it's removable for about 30 minutes. So I'm removing all of the release paper here. It comes off super easily. And then I'm going to add this middle piece on there. And I didn't get it quite right, but you can see it peels off beautifully. It didn't damage anything. All the tape is mostly where it still needs to be. And I can just try again. And then when I let that sit and give it a day, it's going to be permanent and it's going to work just fine. Anytime I'm working with a light up mechanism or an interactive mechanism, I'm constantly testing it. So you can see me pressing the button, making sure it's on the right place, and it is. So now I can add my embellishments on the inside. I'm using the Oh My Stars confetti, which is super, super thin, and then the white sparkle spots that might be my very favorite embellishment of all time. Both of these are super thin. And to me, it kind of reminds me of those cell phone cases that have like a little bit of a shaker element on the inside of them. I used my finger to kind of flatten those out a little bit because remember, I'm just using cardstock for that space to create the shaker element. And then I'll add my wet glue and lay that down really carefully. I almost forgot to add it back behind where my button is. If I hadn't done that, I might have ended up with some shaker pieces sort of wedged in between, and I definitely didn't want that. Once everything's glued, I'm going to check it a couple more times, and then there's one more tiny piece. There's a die that cuts out a heart and the little circle to go around it, like when you're hearting a message, and I just love that. That finishes up our double interactive card. I press the button and it lights up. I've got my lovely shaker pieces on the inside, and then it opens up to give us plenty of room to write a message. I hope that you've enjoyed this video and this inspires you to light up your cards or add some shaker elements. I just think it's so much fun. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time.